It was supposed to be a quick lunch. A crowded McDonald's on a Saturday afternoon, the air thick with the smell of fries and chatter. Parents sat with trays piled high, kids darted toward the play area, and in the middle of it all, 8-year-old Emily Carter clutched a Happy Meal box and asked her mother if she could go fill her soda cup. Her mother nodded, watching Emily disappear into the line near the drink station. She could see her blonde ponytail bobbing through the crowd until she couldn't. At first it didn't seem strange. The place was packed, kids running everywhere. But then 5 minutes passed, then 10, and when the restaurant manager checked the security footage, the grainy black and white video showed something no one could explain. Emily approached the soda fountain and never walked away. One moment she was there, the next, gone. Police swarmed the restaurant within an hour. Every corner was searched, every employee questioned, the exits were covered, but Emily was simply gone. No sign of struggle, no screams, no witnesses. Her mother's cries echoed through the emptying dining room long after the flashing lights faded. For 25 years, Emily Carter was a name on a cold case file. Her face appeared on missing persons posters, aging in computer-generated images. Her parents died never knowing what happened. And then, on a Tuesday morning, a woman in a small town 2 states away called the police to report something impossible. Emily Carter was standing in the parking lot of a McDonald's, wearing the exact same clothes, holding the same Happy Meal box. And she hadn't aged a single day. For most people, a trip to McDonald's is a blur of routine. Order, eat, leave. But for those who remember the Carter case, the Golden Arches are a scar on the map. For 25 years, the disappearance of 8-year-old Emily wasn't just a tragedy, it was an impossibility, a case that even the most seasoned investigators refused to talk about after dark. When Emily reappeared in that parking lot, unchanged, unaged, clutching the same red and yellow Happy Meal box, every theory collapsed. No one could explain where she had been or why her clothes still smelled faintly of fries and cola, as if not a second had passed. The police report from that morning reads like something pulled from a horror novel. Subject exhibits no signs of physical aging. Clothing matches description from 1998 case file. Behavior consistent with a child under 10 years old. Subject does not recognize investigators or acknowledge the passage of time. This story isn't just about a missing child. It's about the space between seconds, the places that don't exist on any map, and the way they sometimes spit you back out. The more we dug into what happened that day, the more we found threads connecting Emily's reappearance to other vanishings. Cases scattered across decades, all sharing the same strange fingerprints. Before we open the first chapter of this investigation, I want you to pause and think, how would you explain it? And more importantly, what would you do if someone you loved walked back into your life, unchanged, 25 years later? If you're ready to step into this maze of unanswered questions, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments which country and city you're watching from, so we know where this story reaches. Because once we start, there's no turning back. Chapter 1. The day the arches went dark. The sky over Fairfield was a pale winter grey, the kind that pressed low and heavy, making the streetlights seem useless, even in the middle of the afternoon. Inside the McDonald's on Fifth Avenue, the air was thick with the hiss of fryers and the hum of conversation. It smelled like salt, grease, and the artificial sweetness of soft serve, comforting to most, unremarkable to all. Eight-year-old Emily Carter sat in a vinyl booth, swinging her legs just above the floor. Her mother, Laura, was unwrapping a cheeseburger when Emily tugged at her sleeve. "Can I get more Coke?" she asked, holding up her half-empty paper cup. Laura smiled absently and nodded. "Stay where I can see you." Emily slid out of the booth and padded toward the drink station. Her ponytail bounced in rhythm with her steps, catching the light under the neon glow of the overhead menu. Laura's eyes followed her, through the crowd, past a group of teenagers laughing too loud, until Emily reached the soda fountain. She pressed the lever. Dark liquid hissed and frothed into the cup. Then she was gone. Laura blinked. She leaned forward, craning her neck. The space where Emily had stood was now filled by a man in a baseball cap pouring iced tea. No yellow sweater, no ponytail, no daughter. The first wave was disbelief. Laura rose, scanning the line, the booths, the play area behind the glass wall. She called Emily's name once, calm, almost amused. Then again, sharper, with a strain in her voice. On the third call, the heads of strangers began to turn. The restaurant manager appeared at her side, concerned but already moving toward the small office where the security feeds looped on dusty monitors. Minutes later, Laura was staring at grainy footage that made her blood run cold. Emily approached the soda machine and vanished between one frame and the next. No one passed in front of her, no one led her away. She simply ceased to exist on camera. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the metal bench by the entrance. Inside, the birthday party in the corner quieted. And Laura Carter, standing in the middle of the dining room, felt a silence settle over her that she would never be able to describe, except to say that in that moment, under the golden arches, something in her world had been erased. Chapter 2. The investigation that never closed. The first police officers arrived within 7 minutes of Laura's call. Their sirens cut through the cold afternoon, red and blue lights flashing against the glass walls of the restaurant. Inside, customers were being herded toward the exit, some still clutching paper bags, others leaving half-eaten meals behind. Detective Alan Briggs stepped in first. He'd worked missing persons cases before, but he knew instantly this wasn't a standard disappearance. Witness statements were too consistent, too strange. Every account ended the same way. She was there, and then she wasn't. The McDonald's security footage was rewound over and over in the cramped manager's office. Each time, the same impossible frame played out. A child in a yellow sweater reaching for the soda lever, and then nothing. No distortion, no shadow, just absence. Briggs leaned closer, rewinding frame by frame until the pixels blurred. There was no gap in the recording, no technical error he could blame. By nightfall, the parking lot was a fortress of squad cars. Search dogs combed the surrounding blocks, their breath steaming in the frigid air. Officers swept nearby alleys, rooftops, even the dumpsters behind the restaurant. Every possible exit had been accounted for within seconds of the 911 call. Emily had not used any of them. Inside, Laura sat wrapped in a silver emergency blanket, her eyes fixed on the door as if her daughter might walk back through it at any moment. A half-empty Happy Meal box sat untouched beside her. The fries inside had gone cold, but the smell still lingered, clinging to the air like a cruel reminder. The official report from that night noted something unusual. All 3 clocks inside the McDonald's, front counter, kitchen and drive-through, were stuck at 3:17 p.m. The power hadn't failed, the fryers kept running, but the clocks refused to move again until midnight, when they all ticked forward in perfect unison. Detective Briggs didn't mention that detail in his press conference the next morning, but from that moment on, he stopped calling it a disappearance. He started calling it a removal. Chapter 3. The theories begin. By the 3rd day, Fairfield wasn't just a small town with a missing child, it was a name on every national broadcast. News vans lined the street in front of the McDonald's, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like metal flowers. Reporters swarmed Detective Briggs at every opportunity, their questions sharpening into accusations. Was this a kidnapping? A cover-up? But in the quiet, inside the police station, the theories turning in Briggs's mind were far stranger than anything on the evening news. The initial sweep of the building had uncovered something that the public wasn't told. In the crawl space above the ceiling tiles near the soda fountain, officers found a thin, perfectly circular patch where the dust was disturbed. No footprints, no tools, just a faint outline about 4 feet wide. Forensics confirmed it wasn't structural damage, and it wasn't there during a routine fire inspection just a week earlier. It was as if something had briefly opened there, and then sealed shut. Witness interviews became more troubling with each session. A teenage cashier swore she saw a flash of white light in her peripheral vision just before Emily vanished. A delivery driver claimed the temperature dropped sharply when he entered, his breath visible in the air, though the restaurant thermostat read a steady 72 degrees. That week, a man from 3 towns over came forward. His own daughter, he said, had vanished in 1974 in a Woolworth's department store. She too had been 8 years old. The security footage from that case was long gone, but the description was eerily similar. One moment she was walking between aisles, the next she was simply gone. Briggs started mapping these disappearances. The pins on the map spanned decades and states, but the coordinates formed no clear pattern until he noticed that all the incidents had occurred in commercial buildings lit by fluorescent tubes installed within the year of the disappearance. It wasn't proof. But it was enough for Briggs to begin wondering if these cases weren't about abductions at all. If Emily hadn't been taken by someone, maybe she'd been taken somewhere. Chapter 4. The object in the storage room. 2 weeks after Emily vanished, McDonald's corporate sent a maintenance crew to replace the ceiling tiles above the soda fountain. Detective Briggs was there, watching with narrowed eyes. He didn't tell them about the dust ring, just stood back as the workers lifted tile after tile, their ladders squealing against the vinyl floor. That's when one of them swore under his breath. Wedged between the insulation and a steel beam was a small weathered box. No dust, no spiderwebs. It looked placed there. The cardboard was brittle but unmarked, like it had been kept in perfect conditions. Briggs slipped on gloves and lifted it down. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, wrapped in thin, yellowed paper, was a child's hair ribbon, red, frayed at the edges. Beneath it, a photograph. It showed a little girl standing in front of a Woolworths store. The image was faded, the colors almost gone, but the details were sharp enough to see her bright dress, and the date printed on the white border, June 1974. The same year, the other man's daughter had vanished. Briggs's pulse quickened. On the back of the photo, written in cramped, uneven script, were 3 words: "The lights hum." Forensics confirmed the ribbon's fibers were intact, as though it had never been exposed to decades of air and dust. No fingerprints on the box, the ribbon, or the photo. Not even his own once he checked. That night, Briggs sat in his apartment with the photo under a desk lamp, staring at the little girl's face. It wasn't Emily. It wasn't any missing child in the database. But something about her eyes made his stomach knot. They were watching something behind the photographer. Chapter 5. The sound in the air. The hum started 3 days after Briggs brought the ribbon and photo into evidence storage. At first it was faint, just a low vibration in the edge of his hearing, like the thrum of a distant transformer. He thought it was tinnitus. But when he left the station, it stopped. Every time he stepped back inside, it returned. He asked the building supervisor about any electrical problems. None. No loose ballasts, no failing wires. Yet several officers admitted they'd been hearing it too, mostly in the interview room where the McDonald's employees had been questioned. Briggs had an audio technician bring in sensitive recording equipment. The playback was unsettling. Beneath the steady hiss of the room's silence, there was a layered tone, too pure to be mechanical, too consistent to be random. The waveform, when analyzed, pulsed in a strange rhythm. 3 short beats, a pause, then one long, sustained note. It reminded Briggs of Morse code, but it didn't match any known pattern. He took the technician aside and played him the words written on the back of the 1974 photo. "The lights hum." The man blanched. "That's not electrical," he said quietly. "That's intentional." Over the next week, Briggs began connecting dots he wished he hadn't. every disappearance he'd mapped before. Each building had fluorescent lighting installed within 6 months of the incident, and in each there were undocumented service calls by contractors who didn't exist in any corporate records. In some cases, the lights had been replaced days before the vanishings. One evening, alone in the station, Briggs locked the door to the evidence room and turned off every light except the single fixture above the table. He waited. The hum grew louder. And then, just for an instant, he smelled something impossible: French fries, salt, and a trace of children's shampoo. The air around him felt thinner, as though the room were breathing. Chapter 6. Through the hum officer. Dana Keene was the first to admit she couldn't ignore it anymore. The hum had been keeping her awake, vibrating in the back of her skull even when she was off duty. On a cold Thursday night, she asked Briggs if she could stay behind after everyone else left. They killed the main breakers to the station, leaving only the single buzzing fluorescent over the evidence table. The hum persisted, steady, pulsing, almost alive. Dana walked slow circles around the room, eyes half closed, tilting her head like she was trying to catch a faint voice in a crowd. Briggs stayed by the door, notebook in hand, watching her steps. She stopped directly under the light. Her breath hitched. "Do you hear it? Changing?" she whispered. Briggs didn't answer. The tone had shifted, the 3 short beats now tighter, almost urgent. Dana's pupils widened in the harsh light. She reached up, fingertips brushing the humming tube. Briggs opened his mouth to tell her to stop, and the air snapped. It wasn't a sound so much as the sensation of being yanked forward by the ribs. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched toward her, thin and sharp. The hum became a low, resonant chord that Briggs felt in his teeth. Dana's hand was still reaching, but her body was already fading, edges dissolving like ash in a strong wind. For a heartbeat, her face was illuminated from some other place, a pale blue glow leaking through her skin. Then she was gone. The light flickered twice and steadied. The room was silent. Briggs's pen had rolled to the floor. Only one thing remained where Dana had stood: a red and yellow Happy Meal box, the paper still warm, as though it had just been handed over the counter. Chapter 7. The clues they bring back. The Happy Meal box sat in the center of the evidence table, almost too perfectly placed, as if whoever or whatever left it there wanted him to find it exactly like this. Briggs stared at it for several minutes, his gloved hands resting on the table's edge, before finally leaning in. The cardboard felt warm, as though it had just come from a human hand. No dust, no signs of aging. Inside, neatly arranged as if packed by an employee following some meticulous instruction, were 3 items: a crumpled napkin, a small plastic clown figurine sealed in a thin, noisy wrapper, and a receipt. The first thing he noticed about the receipt was its printing, faded but not smudged. The date at the top stopped his breath: April 19th, 1974. The same month the Woolworths girl had vanished. But it wasn't just the date that bothered him. It was the address. The location belonged to a McDonald's that had been demolished in the late 80s. The land, now a row of empty storefronts with boarded windows. He checked the paper under UV light. No hidden markings, no modern ink. This was old, yet impossibly well preserved. The toy, too, was authentic, an early 70s model never seen in production after 1976. The napkin, however, was worse. Under magnification, it revealed the faint imprint of a greasy handprint. Small, delicate, definitely a child's. The oils were fresh enough to register on lab equipment, as if the touch had been seconds ago. That night, Briggs laid everything out on his apartment floor, the hair ribbon, the 1974 photograph, and now this Happy Meal box. He kept them in separate evidence bags, yet the air in the room had changed. The ribbon carried the soft, powdery scent of an old classroom. The photo smelled of nothing, almost like the air had been vacuumed away from it. But the Happy Meal box, it was fresh. Salt, hot oil, grilled meat. It made his stomach turn because it was too real, too here. He flipped open his leather-bound case journal and began writing, his hand shaking. The items aren't relics, they're active. They exist somewhere, somewhen, untouched by time. And when someone vanishes, they leave a trace behind. Not here, there. He stared at those last two words for a long time before closing the book, the scent of fries still lingering like a whisper from the other side. Chapter 8. Opening the passage. Briggs didn't tell anyone about the experiment. The department would have shut him down instantly, and the truth was, he wasn't sure if he wanted anyone else in the room when it happened. He'd been tracking patterns for weeks, cross-referencing the timestamp of each disappearance with temperature drops, power surges, and reports of unexplained sound phenomena in the area. A clear link emerged. Every case coincided with an unusual harmonic spike at exactly 3:12 a.m., lasting no more than 18 seconds. The hum Dana had heard wasn't random, it was the key. He chose the basement of the old municipal archives for his test. The space was dark, concrete walls slick with condensation, a smell of mildew thick in the air. He arranged the evidence items on the floor in a perfect circle. The ribbon, the photograph, and the Happy Meal box. A portable generator powered a single overhead bulb, its faint flicker already making the room feel unstable. At 3:11 a.m., Briggs turned on a directional microphone, amplifying the low ambient noise into his headset. The hum began almost instantly, a subtle vibration that made his chest ache. It built slowly until the bulb above him began to sway, casting warped shadows across the walls. When the pitch shifted, deepening into that 3-beat rhythm, Briggs stepped into the circle. The air thickened, and every instinct screamed at him to back away, his vision blurred at the edges, colors bleeding into each other. The Happy Meal box twitched, sliding half an inch on the concrete without any visible cause. The shadows in the corners began to move, not stretch, crawl. Long, thin shapes spilled upward from the floor like reverse silhouettes, pulling toward the evidence circle. Briggs kept his voice steady as he spoke into his recorder. "Contact seems imminent." Visual anomalies present, auditory distortion increasing. The bulb above him popped, shattering glass over his shoulders. For one heartbeat, the room was completely dark. Then, in the black, something breathed, slow, deliberate, and close enough that he felt the air move against his face. When the generator's backup light flickered on, Briggs wasn't alone in the circle anymore. Chapter 9. The Ones Who Waited. The figure stood at the far edge of the circle, but its presence filled the entire basement. It was tall, impossibly so, its head brushing the low concrete ceiling, forcing it to tilt slightly, as if it had been living in spaces too small for too long. Briggs's first instinct was to look at the face, but the shadows clung to it like a living mask. Only the mouth was visible, pale and thin-lipped, stretched into something that wasn't quite a smile. The air around it warped. The ribbon on the floor twitched. The Happy Meal box rattled softly, the toy inside tapping against the cardboard in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Tap, 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 like it was keeping time with the thing's breathing. It took a single step forward. The concrete under its foot groaned, as if the weight wasn't just physical. Briggs felt pressure behind his eyes, a faint ringing in his ears, the same pitch he'd heard at every disappearance site. Then the voice came, not through his ears, but inside his skull. "They don't grow here." Briggs froze. His mind tried to process the words, but they came with images. Children, frozen in time, their eyes wide, skin untouched by years. He saw them walking slowly in a place without sun, corridors of black water reflecting nothing. The figure crouched, its knees bending at unnatural angles, bringing its hidden face closer to Briggs's. The mouth moved again. "You can trade places, if you like." And for the first time in his career, Briggs dropped his recorder. The hum surged, and all the lights went out. When they returned, the circle was empty. The evidence was gone. So was Briggs. Chapter 10. The Trade. The basement was no longer a place. It was a wound in the world. The air clung heavy against Briggs's skin, damp with the scent of rust and something older, something that carried the metallic tang of blood and the sweetness of rot. Where moments ago the hum had filled every crevice, there was now only a crushing absolute stillness, the kind that made even his heartbeat sound too loud. The circle of evidence at his feet had been disturbed. Each object subtly shifted toward the figure that stood opposite him, as if gravity itself leaned in that direction. Briggs tried to speak, but the muscles in his jaw felt locked. The figure had not moved closer, yet the space between them seemed to shrink with every breath. Its mouth, pale, colorless, opened just enough for words to spill out like air, escaping from a long sealed vault. "A place without clocks," it whispered. "A place without age." Briggs didn't realize he was stepping forward until the edge of the circle crumbled beneath his boot. Something brushed against his arm. He glanced down, and the ribbon was no longer on the floor. It was coiled around his wrist, warm to the touch, tightening like a slow pulse. The photograph had shifted too. It now rested against his boot. The faces of the children in the image turned sharply toward him, their eyes pinpoints of reflected light. In the picture, one child's mouth began to open, impossibly. The paper stretching, as if it could breathe. A thought bloomed in Briggs's mind, not his own. "You can stay where you are, or stay where we are." It wasn't a choice, not really. The hum returned, soft at first, then swelling until the walls vibrated. The Happy Meal box tipped over, spilling the toy clown onto the concrete. Its painted smile seemed wider than before, its head swiveling just enough to face him. Briggs's instinct screamed to run, but his body was already leaning toward the figure. The shadows at the edges of the basement thickened, folding over one another like waves collapsing inward. He felt the air grow colder, and with it, the sensation of being watched from every possible angle. Somewhere in that blackness, dozens, no, hundreds, of small breaths rose and fell in unison. The figure moved then, its long arms unfolding with deliberate slowness. It extended one hand toward him. The skin was too smooth, as if it had never been touched by sun or time. When Briggs hesitated, the hand turned palm up, revealing something resting inside, his own badge, tarnished and cracked, as though it had been lying somewhere for decades. He hadn't lost it. It was still pinned to his chest. Yet here it was, impossibly aged, impossibly real. The trade happened without ceremony. One moment Briggs was staring at the figure. The next, he was staring out from behind its eyes. He felt the weight of the room shift, the air pressed differently against skin that wasn't his. His voice, if it could still be called that, whispered from somewhere far away, "They don't grow here. And now neither will you." And in the empty basement, a new figure stood in the circle. It looked like Briggs, wore his clothes, even carried his mannerisms, but the eyes were wrong, too still, too knowing. It bent down, gathered the ribbon, the photograph and the box, and tucked them away into a leather satchel. Without a glance back, it climbed the basement stairs and stepped into the city's night air, blending effortlessly into the world above. Days later, Briggs's desk at the department was cleared. His disappearance was treated like any other unsolved case, another file in a cabinet already sagging with them. But in the evidence room, a single envelope appeared without explanation. Inside was a photograph, dated April 19th, 1974. A line of children stood on a shore of black water. At the end of the line was Briggs, unchanged, eyes fixed on the camera. Behind him, in the shadows, hundreds of pale faces floated just beneath the surface. At night, when the precinct was empty, the envelope would slide an inch across the evidence shelf, and if someone was unlucky enough to be there when it moved, they'd hear it. 3 faint taps, spaced evenly apart, coming from somewhere inside the photograph. The investigation into Briggs's disappearance ended the same way as the dozens before it. Quietly, filed away, and forgotten by everyone except those who couldn't sleep without hearing the hum. Weeks later, the basement was sealed. The city's official report called it structurally unsafe, but the work crew tasked with bricking up the entrance left before finishing the job. None of them could explain why. They just knew they didn't want to be underground anymore. In the dust of the half-finished wall, a faint circle of moisture remained, perfectly round, never spreading, never drying. Sometimes, when the wind tunneled down the empty stairwell, it carried a sound too precise to be an accident. 3 slow, deliberate footsteps, followed by a child's voice whispering a name. One night, long after the building was condemned, a passerby swore they saw someone standing in the shadows near the basement door. The figure looked exactly like Briggs, down to the creases in his jacket. But when a car's headlights swept over the alley, the figure was gone, leaving only the echo of tapping from deep below. And far beneath the city, in a place without sun or time, a new child stood among the others, eyes blank, face untouched by years, waiting.